Under the harsh glow of the airport's fluorescent lights, Layla clutched her boarding pass with trembling fingers, her mind racing as she hurried through the crowded terminal. The day had already been a whirlwind of missed alarms, frantic packing, and a near disaster with a late taxi, but she was finally here at the gate, ready to board the flight that would take her to a long-awaited new chapter in her life. She was nervous, yes, but excited too. This trip wasn't just a vacation, it was a chance to prove something to herself. She had spent years living quietly, never drawing attention, the kind of woman who blended into the background, underestimated by everyone around her, even her own family. They all saw her as simple, shy, perhaps even fragile, the kind of person who needed protecting. What they didn't know was that Layla had a streak of quiet strength, a determination she had never been given credit for. She was about to step onto that plane when it happened. Just as the boarding agent scanned her ticket, a strangled noise behind her caught her attention. She turned instinctively and saw a man stumble through the crowd, his movements unsteady, his face pale beneath a sheen of sweat. Before she could react, he collapsed heavily at her feet, his weight striking the polished floor with a sickening thud that made everyone around gasp and scatter back. Layla's breath caught in her throat as she crouched beside him, her heart pounding. He was huge, easily over 6 feet tall, his body radiating heat and tension even as he lay motionless. His clothes were dark and utilitarian, marked with smudges of dirt and something darker, blood, she realized with a jolt of horror. For a moment, everything seemed to slow. She could hear the distant murmur of the crowd, the sharp call of the boarding agent for help, the quick, shallow breaths of the man at her feet. His eyes fluttered open, a piercing gray, locking onto hers with desperate intensity. "Help, please," he rasped, his voice ragged, filled with both strength and pain. It was then she saw the insignia stitched faintly on his torn shirt, a trident symbol she recognized from countless documentaries and news reports. Navy SEAL. A wounded SEAL had just collapsed in front of her. Without thinking, Layla acted. Her years of being quiet didn't mean she was weak. She had always been observant, always learning in silence. She tore off her light scarf and pressed it firmly against the worst of his bleeding wounds, her hand steady even as adrenaline surged through her veins. "Stay with me," she urged softly, leaning close so he could hear her over the growing noise of the crowd. "You're going to be okay. Help is coming." The man grimaced, his muscles twitching as if he wanted to push himself up but couldn't. "No, no ambulance," he forced out, shaking his head slightly. His grip shot out, surprisingly strong, and caught her wrist. "They can't know I'm here. Please." His words were cryptic and urgent, and Layla felt a chill race down her spine. Who was after him? What had happened to leave a highly trained soldier bleeding and terrified in the middle of an airport terminal? She didn't have answers, but she could see the desperation in his eyes, and it was enough to make her decision. "All right," she whispered, leaning closer. "But you have to trust me." She didn't know where the words came from, but they felt right. As the boarding gate attendants started shouting for security, Layla knew she had to move fast. She helped the man, whose sheer size made it almost impossible for her to fully lift him, get to his knees. He gritted his teeth, sweat dripping from his temple, and somehow managed to push himself upright with her bracing his side. Together they staggered toward a maintenance door nearby, Layla leading the way with determination that shocked even her. Behind them, she could hear the confused shouts of other passengers, but no one dared to stop them. She shoved open the unmarked door and guided him into a narrow service corridor that smelled faintly of cleaning supplies and stale air. Once they were out of sight, the man sagged against the wall, breathing heavily. You didn't have to do this," he muttered, his voice low and strained. Layla shook her head. "Yes, I did. Now tell me who's after you and why you can't go to the hospital." His eyes flickered with hesitation, but he seemed to sense that she wasn't going to abandon him. "My team," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "We were ambushed. Someone betrayed us. I escaped, barely. If the wrong people find me before I can get to my contact, it's over." Layla's stomach tightened. This wasn't just a random accident. This man was caught in something dangerous, something far bigger than either of them. She studied his face, noting the sharp lines of his jaw, the haunted look in his eyes. He was clearly trained for situations like this, yet right now he was vulnerable, relying entirely on her. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. "Then we need to get you somewhere safe," she said firmly. Her voice surprised her with its resolve. The SEAL managed a faint, almost incredulous smile, as if he hadn't expected such determination from a woman he'd met mere minutes ago. "You're different," he said, his words slurring slightly as exhaustion overtook him. "Most people would have run." Layla met his gaze steadily. I'm not most people. Somewhere in the distance, alarms began to sound and heavy footsteps echoed closer. Layla's pulse spiked, but she tightened her grip on his arm and pulled him away from the wall. Come on, she urged. If we stay here they'll find us. With a grunt of effort, he forced himself to move, leaning heavily on her as they navigated the twisting corridors. The emergency exit ahead was their only chance. Layla didn't know what awaited them beyond it, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wasn't about to let this man die, not when fate had dropped him at her feet and given her the chance to prove just how strong she truly was. The metal door swung open with a jarring creak and Layla half-dragged, half-guided the wounded seal through it into the night air beyond the airport's shadowed service lot. The smell of jet fuel mingled with the sharp tang of rain-soaked asphalt, and the chill breeze cut through her thin blouse making her shiver. Behind them, the faint echo of pounding boots and clipped voices told her security, or someone worse, was already hunting for them. The man's weight bore down on her like a living anchor, his breaths ragged and shallow, each step seeming to cost him more strength than he had left. She had no idea how she was even managing to keep him upright, but fear and determination lent her a strength she didn't know she possessed. We need to keep moving, she whispered urgently, glancing around the dimly lit lot for options. A line of luggage carts, some scattered maintenance vehicles, and a high chain-link fence were all that greeted her searching eyes. Somewhere beyond the fence, the glow of taxi lights flickered like distant beacons of hope. If they could just get there, maybe she could hail a cab and disappear into the city before their pursuers closed in. Can you climb? She asked him, her voice low and tense. The seal, whose name she still didn't know, looked at the fence with a grimace. Not like this, he admitted through clenched teeth. But I can boost you up. Then, you pull me. Layla's heart hammered as she nodded. They staggered to the fence and true to his word, he locked his fingers together, giving her a shaky but determined platform to climb. She scrambled over the cold metal, scraping her palms and knees, then reached down to grip his wrist with both hands as he hauled himself upward, his muscles trembling with effort. For a terrifying moment she thought he'd slip and fall, but with a guttural growl, he swung his leg over and dropped down beside her on the other side, landing in a crouch before collapsing against the base of a streetlight. Layla crouched beside him, her breath coming in ragged gasps. We need to move before they get through, she said, glancing back at the looming fence. Even as the words left her mouth, she saw shadows converging on the other side. A deep, commanding voice shouted something unintelligible, and the metallic rattle of the fence signaled they were climbing. Without another word, Layla hooked her arm under the seals and pulled him to his feet. Together they stumbled toward the edge of the lot, where a row of waiting taxis sat idling. The first driver gave them a wary look as they approached, his gaze flicking to the seal's blood-streaked shirt. No trouble? He barked in accented English, shaking his head. I don't want trouble. Please? Layla begged, desperation sharpening her tone. He's hurt. We just need a ride. I'll pay triple. The driver hesitated, clearly torn, until another shout rang out behind them. The sound of boots hitting pavement broke his resolve, and he unlocked the rear door with a muttered curse. Layla shoved the seal inside, then scrambled in after him. Drive, she cried. The driver didn't need to be told twice. The taxi lurched forward, tires squealing as they sped away from the airport, weaving through the tangle of service roads and merging onto the main highway. Layla dared a glance back through the rear window and saw dark figures spilling out of the gate they had escaped from, some pointing, others raising radios to their mouths. Her stomach twisted with fear, but relief surged alongside it. They'd made it out at least for now. The seal slumped against the seat, his head lolling to one side. In the harsh yellow glow of the taxi's interior light, Layla could see just how bad his condition was. Blood had soaked through her makeshift bandage, his lips were pale, and his breathing had become frighteningly shallow. Stay with me, she urged, pressing her palm to his cheek. Hey, don't you dare give up on me now. His eyes fluttered open, clouded with pain but still sharp enough to focus on her. Names? Cole? He rasped. The single word seemed to take monumental effort. Layla, she replied, her throat tightening. Just hang on, Cole. I'm going to get you somewhere safe. He gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod, then closed his eyes again, conserving what little strength he had left. Layla turned to the driver. Do you know any place nearby where we can go? Somewhere private? The man frowned, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. There is motel. 10 minutes. Good, Layla said, clutching Cole's hand tightly. Just get us there. The ride felt endless, every second stretched thin with tension. Layla kept glancing back, half expecting to see headlights closing in, but the road behind them stayed dark and empty. When the taxi finally pulled into the cracked asphalt lot of a rundown roadside motel, Layla nearly sobbed with relief. She paid the driver with shaky hands, pressing extra bills into his palm before he sped off without a backward glance. With great effort, she helped Cole out of the car and half-carried him to one of the ground floor rooms. The motel clerk didn't even look up from his television as she passed, merely sliding a key across the counter without a word. Inside the dim, stale-smelling room, Layla guided Cole to the bed and eased him down onto the thin mattress. His breathing was ragged, his skin clammy under her touch. She knew enough to realize he needed medical attention, real medical attention, but his warning at the airport still echoed in her mind. No ambulance. They can't know I'm here. Whoever they were, he clearly feared them more than his own injuries. Cole, she said softly, brushing damp hair back from his forehead. I need to clean your wounds, but I don't have supplies. I'm going to have to go out and get some things. Will you be okay alone for a few minutes? His eyes cracked open, a flicker of defiance sparking through the haze of pain. I'll manage, but be careful. If they followed us, they won't, Layla promised, though she wasn't entirely sure. Lock the door behind me. She slipped out into the night, her heart pounding with each step. The world felt strangely different now, sharper and more dangerous. Just hours ago, she'd been an ordinary woman boarding a flight, invisible to everyone around her. Now she was part of something she didn't fully understand, responsible for a man whose life seemed to hang by a thread. As she crossed the cracked parking lot toward the faint glow of a nearby convenience store, she made herself a silent vow. Whatever it took, she would keep Cole alive. She didn't know why fate had thrown them together, but she wasn't about to fail him. Not when he had trusted her with his life. Layla pushed open the creaky glass door of the convenience store, the faint chime above her head sounding unnaturally loud in the near-empty shop. The air inside smelled of stale coffee and cheap cleaning supplies, and the harsh fluorescent light seemed far too bright after the dim motel parking lot. Her eyes darted around quickly, scanning for what she needed. Bandages, antiseptic, bottled water, energy bars, anything that might help stabilize Cole until she could figure out what to do next. The only other person in the store was a tired-looking clerk leaning on the counter, flipping through a worn magazine. He barely glanced up at her, and Layla forced herself to appear calm as she grabbed supplies off the shelves, shoving them into a plastic basket. She kept her movements brisk but deliberate, fighting the urge to run. Every instinct screamed at her to hurry, but she couldn't afford to draw attention. When she reached the register, she pasted on what she hoped was a casual smile and handed over a crumpled wad of cash. The clerk didn't seem interested enough to even count it properly, just shoved it into the till and handed her a bag. "Have a good night," he mumbled, his voice thick with boredom. Layla muttered a thank you and practically bolted out the door, clutching the bag to her chest. As she stepped into the night, the cool air hit her like a slap, clearing her head. She paused for a brief second, scanning the parking lot. Her eyes swept over every shadow, every parked car. Nothing seemed out of place, but that didn't ease the tight knot of anxiety coiled in her chest. With quick, purposeful strides, she crossed the lot and returned to the motel room. She tapped lightly on the door in the pattern they had agreed on. 3 short knocks, a pause, then 2 more. There was a click as the lock turned, and the door opened just enough for Cole's sharp gray eyes to appear. He looked pale and exhausted, but still alert, still every inch the warrior despite his injuries. "You're back," he rasped, his voice low. Relief washed through Layla at the sight of him conscious. She slipped inside, locking the door behind her, and set the bag on the small table beside the bed. "I got what we need," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Cole nodded faintly, then shifted with a grimace, peeling off the blood-soaked shirt he'd been wearing. Layla's breath caught at the sight of his wounds, angry, ragged gashes across his ribs and shoulder, bruises blooming in dark patches across his torso. It was worse than she'd realized. Swallowing her fear, she forced her hands to steady as she opened the antiseptic and bandages. "This is going to hurt," she warned, meeting his gaze. "Do it," he growled, jaw tightening. Layla cleaned the wounds as best she could, working quickly but carefully. Cole didn't make a sound beyond the occasional sharp intake of breath, though his muscles went rigid under her touch. She couldn't help but admire his strength, even as her heart ached for the pain he was enduring. When she finished wrapping the last bandage, she sat back on her heels and exhaled shakily. "There," she murmured. "It's not perfect, but it should hold." Cole's lips curved in a faint, wry smile. Better than most field medics, he said, his voice rough but sincere. Thank you, Layla. The simple gratitude in his tone sent a strange warmth through her chest. She busied herself cleaning up the supplies, trying to ignore the way her pulse raced whenever he looked at her. You need to rest, she said firmly. Sleep if you can. I'll keep watch. Cole's gaze sharpened at that. You shouldn't have to, you don't really have a choice, she interrupted gently but firmly. You're in no shape to fight off whoever's after you. I'm not completely helpless, you know? A flicker of something like respect crossed his face. After a moment, he nodded, settling back against the pillow with a wince. All right. But wake me at the first sign of trouble. Layla sat by the window, peering through a gap in the faded curtains. The night outside was still, the only sounds the distant hum of traffic and the occasional bark of a stray dog. Her mind churned as she kept watch, replaying everything that had happened since the airport. None of it felt real. Just hours ago she'd been an ordinary traveler, invisible to the world. Now she was hiding out with a Navy SEAL who claimed his own people had betrayed him. Her thoughts kept circling back to his cryptic words. Someone betrayed us. If the wrong people find me before I can get to my contact, it's over. Who could betray someone like Cole? And what did over mean? Over for him? For his team? For something bigger? She didn't have answers, and that gnawed at her. Hours passed slowly, the darkness outside thinning to a gray pre-dawn light. Cole stirred restlessly in his sleep, muttering something unintelligible. Layla's heart squeezed as she watched him. Even in rest, he seemed ready to fight, his body tense, fists clenched. She wondered what horrors he'd faced, what missions he'd survived to make him this way. As she sat there, she heard it, a faint crunch of gravel outside the window. Her blood turned to ice. Moving silently, she crouched and peered through the curtain. Two figures were moving across the parking lot, their shapes dark and indistinct. They weren't motel guests, she realized immediately. Their movements were too deliberate, too predatory. One of them raised a hand, pointing toward their room. Layla's pulse skyrocketed. She spun toward Cole, hurrying to his side and shaking his shoulder urgently. Cole, wake up. They found us. His eyes snapped open instantly, all traces of exhaustion gone, replaced by laser-sharp focus. In a heartbeat, he was on his feet, moving with a predator's grace despite his injuries. How many? He asked tersely. 2, she whispered. But there could be more. Cole grabbed her wrist and pulled her toward the bathroom. Hide in the tub. Stay quiet. Layla shook her head fiercely. I'm not leaving you, this isn't up for debate, he hissed. I can't fight if I'm worried about you. His grip on her wrist tightened, and for a moment, Layla saw the steel in him, the unyielding command of a man who had led others through hell and survived. She swallowed hard and nodded, retreating into the bathroom. The last thing she saw before the door swung shut was Cole crouching by the door, a broken chair leg in his hand like a makeshift weapon. Moments later, the motel room door burst open with a crash, and heavy boots thundered inside. Layla clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle a scream, her whole body trembling as she crouched in the tub. She couldn't see what was happening, but she could hear it. The guttural grunts of struggle, the sickening thud of bodies colliding, the sharp crack of something breaking. Then silence. Her breath caught. Seconds stretched into eternity. Finally, the bathroom door opened and Cole appeared, battered and bloodied but standing tall. It's clear, he said, his voice rough. Layla sprang to her feet, her relief overwhelming. Cole, are you? No time, he cut her off. More will come. We have to move. Now. Without another word, he grabbed her hand and pulled her into the dawn light, leaving the ruined motel room, and 2 unconscious attackers, behind. The morning air was cold and damp as Layla and Cole slipped into the narrow alley behind the motel, their breaths visible in pale wisps. The adrenaline surging through Layla's veins made every sound sharper, every shadow deeper. She could still hear the echo of the violent struggle behind them, the memory of those heavy boots pounding across the motel floor as vivid as if it were still happening. Cole's grip on her hand was iron tight, his injured body moving with a frightening intensity that made it easy to forget how badly he was hurt. They kept low, darting between trash bins and cracked concrete walls until they reached the end of the alley. Cole paused, scanning the street beyond with sharp, calculating eyes. A few cars passed lazily, their drivers oblivious to the life-or-death chase unfolding just beyond their sight. Layla's chest heaved, her lungs burning, but she didn't dare speak. Finally, Cole released a tense breath. Clear, for now, he murmured. He turned to her, his face pale but focused. We need to disappear before backup arrives. They'll have people combing the area soon. Layla nodded, swallowing hard. Where do we go? Cole's gaze flickered around, landing on a rusted delivery truck parked a block away. There, he said, pointing. We can't risk public transportation or cabs anymore. Too easy to track. That truck's our best shot. They moved quickly, keeping to the edges of buildings until they reached the vehicle. Cole tested the handle, found it locked, then glanced around before smashing the side window with a swift, precise strike from his elbow. Layla winced at the sharp crack of breaking glass, but Cole didn't hesitate. Within seconds he had the door open and was guiding her inside. Stay low, he ordered as he slid into the driver's seat. If anyone spots us, they'll think we're just another delivery run. Layla crouched down, clutching the edge of the worn seat as Cole hotwired the truck with practiced efficiency. The engine coughed to life, and they pulled out onto the street just as a pair of black SUVs turned into the motel parking lot behind them. Layla's heart lurched into her throat. They're here, she whispered. Cole's jaw clenched, but his hands stayed steady on the wheel. Then we stay ahead of them. He took a series of sharp turns, weaving through side streets and back alleys with an instinctive knowledge of pursuit tactics. Layla kept glancing out the window, half expecting to see the SUVs bearing down on them at any moment. Miraculously, they didn't appear. After several tense minutes, Cole finally slowed, his shoulders relaxing fractionally. We've shaken them for now, he said. Layla let out a shaky breath, though her nerves remained raw. Cole, she began hesitantly, I think it's time you tell me what's really going on. Who are these people? Why are they trying to kill you? Cole's eyes stayed fixed on the road, his expression unreadable. For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then quietly he spoke. My team was on a mission overseas. Classified op. We were supposed to extract a high-value target connected to a terrorist network. But someone sold us out. We walked straight into an ambush. His hands tightened on the wheel, knuckles white. Most of my men, they didn't make it out. I barely did. Layla's throat tightened. I'm so sorry. He shook his head. Save your sympathy. What matters now is that the traitor isn't just some enemy informant. They're inside our own organization. Someone high up. They want me dead because I know too much, and because I can identify them. Layla felt a chill creep down her spine. So, these people chasing us, they're not terrorists, Cole finished grimly. They're mercenaries hired to clean up loose ends. And right now we're the loosest end there is. Layla's mind spun. It was like something out of a spy thriller, except it was terrifyingly real. You said something before about a contact, she said slowly. Someone who can help? Cole nodded. An old friend. He's off the grid, but if I can reach him, he'll get us out and expose whoever's behind this. Where is he? Layla asked. Outside the city, about 50 miles west. But getting there won't be easy. They'll have roadblocks, surveillance, maybe even drones. He glanced at her, his expression softening slightly. I shouldn't have dragged you into this. You should have run when you had the chance. Layla met his gaze steadily. I wasn't about to leave you to die on that airport floor. So, like it or not, you're stuck with me. For the first time since she'd met him, Cole let out a rough chuckle. It was brief and humorless, but it lit a spark of warmth in his otherwise grim demeanor. You've got guts, I'll give you that. They drove in silence for a while, the city giving way to stretches of industrial warehouses and empty lots. Just as Layla was starting to hope they might make it without incident, a flash of movement in the side mirror caught her eye. Cole, she said sharply. Behind us. He glanced back and swore under his breath. A black SUV was barreling down the road, closing fast. Hold on, he barked, slamming the accelerator. The truck roared forward, but the SUV was built for speed. It gained on them rapidly, its dark windows gleaming menacingly in the sunlight. Layla's pulse pounded as she clung to the seat. What do? We fight, Cole growled. He swerved violently, trying to throw off their pursuers, but the SUV matched every move. A second vehicle appeared ahead, blocking the road. Trap! Cole shouted. Without hesitation, he yanked the wheel hard to the right, sending the truck careening down a narrow service road. The sudden turn nearly threw Layla into the door, but she held on, teeth gritted. The SUV followed, tires screeching. Bullets pinged off the truck's rear bumper, the sharp metallic clangs making Layla's blood run cold. They're shooting at us, she cried. Stay down. Cole ordered. Layla ducked, heart hammering as the world became a blur of speed and noise. Cole's face was grimly focused, his injured body straining with every maneuver. We can't outrun them like this, he muttered. We need cover. Up ahead, an abandoned factory loomed, its rusted gates hanging open. Cole didn't hesitate. He swerved into the lot, the truck bouncing over cracked pavement. The SUVs followed, their engines growling like predators closing in on prey. Cole slammed the brakes, bringing the truck to a skidding stop behind a row of rusted machinery. "Out!" he barked, shoving his door open. Layla scrambled after him, her legs trembling. "Run to that building," he pointed toward a low structure with boarded-up windows. "Go now." "What about you?" she shouted. "I'll cover you." Cole grabbed a piece of metal pipe from the ground, brandishing it like a weapon. Layla ran, fear and determination driving her forward. Behind her, she heard Cole engage the mercenaries in brutal, desperate combat. The clash of metal, the shouts of men, the dull thuds of impact filled the air. She burst into the building, gasping for breath, and turned just in time to see Cole stagger inside, blood on his face but fire in his eyes. "We don't have much time," he panted, grabbing her hand. "We have to lose them completely. There's a river nearby. If we make it there, we can vanish." Layla nodded, her fear hardening into resolve. Together, they plunged deeper into the maze of decaying buildings, the sounds of pursuit closing in behind them. The decaying factory grounds felt like a labyrinth, every corner shrouded in shadow and echoing with the haunting creaks of rusted metal and the distant shouts of their pursuers. Layla's lungs burned as she ran beside Cole, their footsteps crunching on broken glass and debris scattered across the cracked concrete. The air was thick with the smell of oil, mildew, and something acrid that stung the back of her throat. Behind them, the sharp barks of orders and the pounding of boots grew louder, closing in like a tightening noose. Cole's grip on her hand was unrelenting, his strength almost unreal given how badly he was injured, but Layla could feel his body faltering. His breathing was ragged, his movements just slightly less precise than before, and she knew he was nearing his limit. "We're close," he gasped, his voice strained but resolute. "The river's just beyond the far wall. Once we're in the water, we'll have cover." Layla nodded even though every part of her body screamed in protest. Her legs felt like lead, her chest ached, and her vision blurred with exhaustion, but she refused to slow down. She'd come too far, risked too much to fail now. They rounded a corner and came face to face with a chain-link fence topped with jagged barbed wire. On the other side, Layla could see a narrow stretch of river glinting faintly in the morning light, its dark waters flowing swiftly between steep, overgrown banks. Hope flared in her chest, only to die just as quickly when she realized there was no gate or opening. "We can't climb that," she panted, staring up at the cruel barbs. Cole scanned the fence with calculating eyes, his mind clearly racing. Then he pointed to a stack of rusted metal drums leaning precariously against a wall. "We use those. I'll boost you over first." Layla's stomach twisted. "What about you? You can barely stand, Cole." His mouth curved into a grim smile. "I've done worse with less." There was no time to argue. The shouts were getting closer, echoing through the factory like the war cries of hunting beasts. Cole gave her a rough push toward the drums, and together they scrambled to stack them into a makeshift ladder. The drums wobbled dangerously under Layla's weight, but she managed to scramble up, her palms slipping on rust and grime. She perched at the top for a moment, then swung a leg over the fence, careful to avoid the barbed wire. As she dropped down on the other side, she turned back to see Cole climbing after her, his muscles straining visibly. He moved with raw determination, but Layla could see the toll it was taking on him. Blood seeped through his bandages, his breath coming in sharp, ragged bursts. "Come on, Cole," she urged, reaching up to him. "You can do this." With a final heave, he swung himself over the top and dropped down beside her, landing hard on one knee. He grimaced, clearly in pain, but there was no time to rest. "Go!" he barked, grabbing her hand again. They plunged into the thick brush lining the riverbank just as dark figures appeared on the far side of the fence. A gunshot cracked through the air, the bullet whizzing past Layla's ear so close she could feel the heat of it. She stumbled but kept running, adrenaline overriding her fear. The ground sloped sharply downward, and then they were at the water's edge. Cole didn't hesitate. He yanked off his boots and motioned for Layla to do the same. "The current's strong but it'll hide our trail," he said quickly. "Stay close to me. Don't fight the water, just let it carry you." Layla's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. The river looked cold and dangerous, its dark surface churning with unseen hazards. But behind them, more gunshots rang out and she knew there was no choice. She nodded, teeth chattering with fear, and together they plunged into the icy water. The shock stole her breath, and for a terrifying moment she flailed, certain she was going to drown. Then Cole's strong arm wrapped around her waist, steadying her. "Breathe," he shouted over the roar of the current. "I've got you." She forced herself to relax, letting the river take her. The cold was bone-deep, numbing her limbs, but it also seemed to wash away some of the terror clinging to her. They floated downstream, the current sweeping them around a bend and out of sight of their pursuers. Cole kept them close to the bank, using his free arm to guide their path. When they finally emerged from the water several hundred yards later, Layla collapsed onto the muddy shore, coughing and shivering violently. Cole dragged himself beside her, his chest heaving. They lay there for several moments, utterly spent, listening to the distant sounds of shouting fading away upstream. We made it," Layla gasped, hugging herself against the cold. Cole nodded weakly, his eyes scanning the treeline. "For now. But they'll figure out we went into the river. We need to keep moving." Layla groaned, every muscle protesting, but she pushed herself upright. "How far to your contact?" "About 30 miles, Cole said, wincing as he checked his bandages. "We'll need to find transportation again. And we'll need to do it fast." They trudged into the woods, following a narrow game trail that wound through thick undergrowth. The forest was eerily quiet, the only sounds the rustle of leaves and the occasional cry of a distant bird. As they walked, Layla found her thoughts drifting despite herself. She had never imagined she'd end up in a situation like this, on the run with a Navy SEAL, hunted by mercenaries, her life hanging by a thread. And yet, strange as it was, she didn't regret her choices. Cole's presence, fierce and unyielding, gave her a sense of purpose she'd never felt before. After an hour of grueling walking, they emerged onto a rural road. Cole scanned both directions, then pointed to a dilapidated barn in the distance. "We'll hole up there for a bit, figure out our next move." Inside, the barn smelled of hay and old wood. Sunlight filtered through gaps in the walls, casting striped patterns across the dusty floor. Layla sank onto a bale of hay, utterly exhausted. Cole, meanwhile, rummaged through a pile of forgotten tools and equipment. "We'll need disguises," he muttered. "And maybe we can rig something to slow them down." Layla tilted her head, curiosity piqued despite her fatigue. "You really think we can beat them?" Cole looked at her, his gray eyes blazing with determination. "I don't plan to just beat them. I plan to expose them. They killed my team, Layla. They think they can cover it up, bury the truth. But I won't let them." Layla swallowed hard, seeing the raw pain beneath his words. She reached out, placing a hand over his. "Then we'll do it together." For a moment, Cole's tough facade cracked, and he gave her a small, grateful nod. Then he squared his shoulders and turned back to his task. Outside, the sound of an engine drifted faintly on the breeze, growing louder by the second. Cole froze, his entire body tensing. "They've found us," he whispered. "Get ready." Layla's pulse skyrocketed as she scrambled to her feet. There was no more time to rest. The fight for their lives was about to begin again. The growl of the approaching engine grew louder, reverberating through the walls of the old barn like a predator's snarl. Layla's breath caught in her throat as she pressed her back against a stack of hay bales, clutching a rusted metal wrench she had grabbed off the floor. Her pulse pounded so loudly she could barely hear anything else. Cole crouched near the barn's wide, splintered doorway, every muscle taut despite his wounds. His gray eyes were sharp and calculating, his entire demeanor shifting into that of a soldier ready for battle. He held a length of heavy chain wrapped around his forearm like a weapon, his body coiled like a spring. Through a crack in the wall, Layla caught a glimpse of a black SUV pulling into view on the dirt road, kicking up a cloud of dust behind it. Another vehicle followed close behind, its dark shape menacing against the morning light. Layla's throat tightened with fear. "There are two of them," she whispered, barely audible. Cole gave a single, curt nod without looking at her. "Standard tactic. One flushes us out, the other cuts off escape." He glanced over his shoulder, his expression grim but steady. "When I say run, you run for the tree line. Don't look back." "I'm not leaving you," she hissed, anger and fear mingling in her voice. Cole's jaw clenched. "This isn't about leaving me. It's about staying alive. If they get you, everything we've fought for is lost." Layla shook her head fiercely, her grip tightening on the wrench. "We've come this far together. I'm not abandoning you now." For a brief moment, their eyes locked, and something unspoken passed between them. Fear, defiance, and an unbreakable bond forged in fire. Cole exhaled sharply, then gave her a slight nod. "All right. But stay close to me. No heroics." Layla swallowed hard and nodded back. Outside, the SUVs came to a stop. Doors opened with metallic clicks and several men spilled out, dressed in dark tactical gear. Their faces were hidden by black masks, their weapons gleaming ominously in the morning light. One of them spoke into a radio, his words too muffled for Layla to understand. Then, with military precision, the group began to fan out, surrounding the barn. Layla's grip on the wrench tightened until her knuckles went white. Cole's voice was barely a whisper. "They're professionals. But they don't know the terrain like I do." His sharp gaze scanned the interior of the barn, noting every possible advantage. He pointed to a stack of old wooden pallets leaning precariously near the loft ladder. "When they breach, I'll draw their fire. You push those pallets down. It'll block their path and give us a few seconds to move." Layla nodded quickly, her heart hammering so hard it hurt. The next moments stretched unbearably, filled with only the sound of her ragged breathing and the crunch of boots outside. Then, with a deafening crash, the barn doors exploded inward, splinters flying. Shouts rang out as the mercenaries stormed inside. Cole moved like lightning, swinging the heavy chain with deadly precision. The first attacker went down hard, his weapon skittering across the floor. Layla's instincts kicked in. She rushed to the pallets and shoved them with all her strength. The unstable stack toppled with a thunderous clatter, sending wood crashing down on the advancing men and briefly blocking the entrance. "Go!" Cole roared. Layla didn't hesitate. She darted toward the rear of the barn, Cole right behind her. Bullets ripped through the wooden walls, splinters stinging her skin as they ran. They burst out a narrow side door and plunged into the open field beyond. The tall grass whipped against Layla's legs, slowing her, but she pushed forward with everything she had. Behind them, shouts and gunfire erupted as the mercenaries fought to give chase. "The trees!" Cole shouted, pointing ahead. The dense forest loomed like a wall of green salvation. Layla focused on it, forcing her aching body to keep moving. Just as they reached the edge of the trees, a sharp cry of pain tore from Cole's throat. Layla skidded to a halt and turned to see him stumble, blood blossoming across his shoulder. "Cole!" she screamed, rushing back to him. He gritted his teeth, waving her on. "Keep going. Don't stop." "No." Layla shouted fiercely, looping his arm over her shoulders. "We do this together." Cole didn't argue this time. His weight was staggering, but she refused to let him fall. They staggered into the forest just as bullets chewed into the trees around them. Cole guided her through the underbrush with hoarse, urgent directions. "Left, there's a ravine up ahead, we can lose them in it." Branches tore at Layla's clothes and scratched her skin, but she didn't care. All that mattered was keeping Cole upright and moving. The sound of pursuit was relentless behind them, shouted orders, crashing footsteps, the snap of twigs under heavy boots. Finally, they burst through a thicket and stumbled into a narrow ravine. The steep sides provided instant cover. Cole sagged against the rocky wall, his breath ragged. "Downstream," he panted. "Follow it." They half walked, half stumbled along the ravine's winding path. Gradually, the sounds of their pursuers grew fainter, drowned out by the babble of a small stream trickling through the rocks. Layla didn't dare slow down until they rounded a bend and saw a fallen log bridging the ravine overhead. Cole motioned for her to stop. "We'll rest here. Just for a minute." Layla eased him down carefully, her own legs shaking with exhaustion. His face was pale, his skin clammy. The sight sent a bolt of fear through her. "Cole, you're bleeding too much," she said desperately, tearing off part of her shirt to press against the wound. "We need to get you help now." Cole's hand closed over hers, his grip surprisingly strong. "No hospitals," he rasped. "They'll be watching them all. We just need to make it to my contact." Layla's eyes stung with tears she refused to shed. "You're going to make it," she said fiercely. "I won't let you give up." For a moment, his expression softened, and he gave her a faint, pained smile. "You're tougher than you look." Layla blinked rapidly, pushing away emotion. "Rest. I'll keep watch." Cole reluctantly closed his eyes, though his body remained tense even in supposed rest. Layla crouched nearby, scanning the forest. Every rustle of leaves made her heart jump. Every bird call sounded like a warning. Time crawled. When she finally heard the distant rumble of engines again, dread coiled in her gut. She shook Cole gently. "They're still after us." His eyes snapped open instantly, soldier instincts kicking back in. He pushed himself upright with a groan. "We move. Now." They followed the stream deeper into the forest, moving as quickly as Cole's injuries allowed. At last, through the trees, Layla spotted the faint outline of a cabin. Relief surged through her, but Cole's reaction was cautious. He raised a hand, signaling her to stop. "That's my contact's place," he said quietly. But if they found it first? Layla's breath caught. What do we do? Cole's eyes hardened. We approach carefully. If it's clear, we're safe. If it's not? His voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. Layla nodded, steeling herself. Together they crept closer, every step deliberate and silent. The cabin remained still, no sign of movement. Cole motioned for her to stay back, then limped forward alone. Just as he reached the porch, the door swung open, and a man stepped out, aiming a rifle straight at Cole's chest. Layla's scream tore through the quiet forest. No! Cole froze, his hands lifting instinctively as the barrel of the rifle pressed toward his chest. Layla's scream echoed through the clearing, her body surging forward despite her mind screaming at her to stop. The man on the porch was tall and broad-shouldered, his face weathered and lined from years of hard living. His grip on the weapon was steady, his stance practiced. This was no ordinary backwoods hermit. His dark eyes flicked between Cole and Layla with sharp intelligence, assessing threats in an instant. Cole's voice was hoarse but steady as he spoke, his tone carefully controlled. Daniel. It's me. Cole. For a heartbeat, the man didn't react. Then something shifted in his expression, a flicker of recognition followed by suspicion. Cole? They told me you were dead. They wanted you to think that, Cole said, taking a slow, deliberate step closer. But I'm here and we don't have much time. These people are right behind us. Layla held her breath, her heart hammering. Daniel's gaze darted to the tree-line, scanning for movement, then back to Cole. His grip on the rifle eased slightly, though it didn't lower. Who's she? Layla, Cole answered quickly. She's with me. She helped me get this far. Without her, I wouldn't be standing here. Layla swallowed, trying to look brave despite the terror coursing through her veins. Daniel studied her for a moment, then gave a short nod. Inside. Both of you. Now. Relief surged through Layla so strongly her knees almost buckled. She hurried to Cole's side, looping his arm over her shoulders to support him. Together they crossed the porch and entered the cabin. The interior was sparse but sturdy, filled with the smell of wood smoke and coffee. Heavy curtains blocked out most of the daylight, casting the space in dim, protective shadows. As soon as the door shut behind them, Daniel turned the lock and lowered his rifle. You've got maybe 10 minutes before they catch up, he said gruffly. Start talking. Cole sank heavily into a chair, his face pale with exhaustion and blood loss. Layla hovered near him, anxiety gnawing at her as she tore another strip of cloth from her already ruined shirt to press against his wound. Cole winced but didn't flinch away. It was an ambush, he said, his voice tight with anger. My team was sent in on false intel. They knew we'd walk right into a trap. Everyone else was killed. I barely made it out. Daniel's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with fury. Who sold you out? A private contractor group, Cole spat. They call themselves Black Viper. They've been running covert ops for years, funded under the table by people high up the chain. My team stumbled onto evidence that linked them to weapons smuggling and political assassinations. We were supposed to extract the proof and bring it back. He paused, his breath hitching. But someone tipped them off. Now they're hunting me to keep me silent. Layla's stomach churned as she listened. This wasn't just about survival. Anymore, this was a conspiracy that reached far beyond anything she'd imagined. Daniel's expression grew grim. You're saying you've got evidence? Enough to bring them down? Cole reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a small waterproof data drive, its surface scratched and scuffed. He placed it carefully on the table between them. Everything's on here. Names, dates, operations. If we can get this to the right people, Black Viper is finished. Daniel stared at the drive for a long moment, then gave a low whistle. No wonder they're willing to kill half the state to stop you. We need a secure line to transmit it, Cole said urgently. Somewhere they can't trace. Daniel rubbed a hand over his face, thinking fast. There's an old ranger station up in the mountains. It's off-grid, no landlines, no power except a generator. If we can get there, I can rig a satellite uplink. Layla's heart sank. How far is it? 20 miles, rough terrain, Daniel said. We'll need to move fast and quiet. If they catch us in the open, we're done. Cole's lips pressed into a thin line. Then we move now. You can barely stand, Layla protested, her voice sharp with worry. You've lost so much blood. I don't have a choice, Cole cut in, his tone brooking no argument. Every minute we stay here they get closer. This is bigger than me, Layla. Bigger than us. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them away, forcing herself to be strong. Then I'm going with you. Cole gave her a look that was equal parts frustration and admiration. I know you are. Daniel grabbed a duffel bag from under the table and began stuffing it with supplies. Ammo, a first aid kit, bottled water. He handed Layla a compact pistol. Ever use one of these? Layla's fingers curled around the cold metal. No, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. Daniel's expression was grim but not unkind. Point and squeeze. Don't overthink it. There was no more time to talk. The distant sound of engines and shouting drifted through the night air, closer now. Daniel peeked through the curtains, swore under his breath, then gestured sharply. Out the back. Go, go, go. They slipped out a narrow rear door and into the dense forest beyond the cabin. The night was cold and filled with the hum of insects. Moonlight filtered through the trees, casting shifting patterns on the forest floor. Daniel led the way, moving with surprising stealth for a man his size. Cole limped behind him, leaning heavily on Layla for support. Layla's senses were on overdrive, every crack of a twig sounding like a gunshot. Behind them, voices rose as their pursuers discovered the empty cabin. A spotlight beam swept through the trees, cutting through the darkness. Faster, Daniel urged, his voice barely above a whisper. They pushed deeper into the forest, following a barely visible trail. Layla's lungs burned, her legs screaming in protest, but she didn't dare slow down. She kept glancing at Cole, terrified he might collapse, but his expression was one of sheer determination. After what felt like hours, they reached a rocky incline. Daniel scrambled up first, then reached down to help Layla. Cole gritted his teeth and hauled himself up with sheer willpower. At the top, they paused just long enough to catch their breath. From this vantage point, Layla could see the glow of flashlights moving through the forest below, weaving like angry fireflies. They were gaining ground. They're closing in, Layla whispered, panic tightening her chest. Cole's gaze swept the terrain ahead. We can't outrun them forever. We need to disappear. Daniel pointed toward a narrow crevice between two massive boulders. There's a cave system up ahead. Old mining tunnels. If we get inside, we can lose them. Hope flared in Layla's chest, fragile but real. Without another word, they sprinted toward the rocks, driven by desperation. As they reached the entrance, a gunshot cracked through the night. Layla stumbled with a cry as a bullet grazed her arm, the pain sharp and shocking. Cole whirled, firing back with deadly precision. One of their pursuers went down, buying them precious seconds. Daniel grabbed Layla, half carrying her into the darkness of the cave. Cole followed last, his silhouette stark against the moonlight. Inside, the air was damp and cold. The tunnels twisted and turned, a labyrinth of stone and shadow. Daniel led them deeper, their footsteps echoing. Behind them, the shouts of their enemies grew muffled, confused. Layla pressed a hand to her bleeding arm, gritting her teeth against the pain. Cole's hand brushed her shoulder briefly, a silent reassurance that sent a surge of strength through her. At last, Daniel stopped, raising a hand for silence. They crouched in the darkness, barely daring to breathe. The pursuit noises faded gradually, replaced by the steady drip of water and the pounding of Layla's own heart. Cole exhaled slowly, his voice a rough whisper. We've bought ourselves a little time. Daniel nodded, but his expression was grim. They won't stop. Not until one of us is dead. Layla shivered, clutching the pistol tighter. Then we make sure it isn't us. Cole's eyes met hers in the darkness, fierce and unyielding. We will, he vowed. We have to. The cave was eerily silent except for the steady drip of water echoing through the twisting tunnels, a haunting reminder of how deep underground they had gone. Layla sat against the cold stone wall, clutching her wounded arm, trying to steady her breathing as the damp chill seeped through her clothes. Cole knelt beside her, his strong hands surprisingly gentle as he examined the graze on her arm, his jaw set with concentration. Daniel stood near the entrance, his rifle at the ready, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of pursuit. They had been in the cave for over an hour, waiting, listening, trying to determine if Black Viper had given up the chase or if they were simply regrouping. Layla's heart wouldn't stop pounding, the adrenaline still surging through her veins. Every sound seemed magnified, the whisper of air moving through cracks in the rock, the faint rustle of unseen creatures scuttling in the shadows. She wanted to ask Cole if he thought they were safe, but she didn't want to break the fragile silence that felt like their only protection. Cole finally tied a makeshift bandage around her arm and sat back, wincing as his own injuries protested the movement. His face was pale, drawn tight with exhaustion, but his eyes burned with determination. It's not deep, he said softly, his voice low so it wouldn't carry. You'll be fine. Layla nodded, her throat too tight for words. She reached out and touched his hand, needing the connection, needing to remind herself that he was still here, still fighting. For a brief moment, his fingers curled around hers, warm and strong despite everything. Then he pulled away, turning his focus back to the mission. Daniel moved closer, crouching beside them. "We can't stay here much longer," he said, his voice grim. "They're out there and they know these tunnels exist. If they find another entrance, we'll be trapped like rats." Cole nodded, his expression sharpening. "We head for the ranger station. It's our only chance. Once we transmit the data, we'll have proof. They won't be able to bury this anymore." Layla looked between them, fear coiling in her stomach. "And if they get to us before we can send it?" Cole's gray eyes locked on hers, steady and unflinching. "Then we make our last stand." She swallowed hard, nodding even though dread weighed heavy on her chest. "How far is it from here?" Daniel glanced at his compass, his features etched with tension. "About 8 miles as the crow flies, but through this terrain, it'll feel like double." "And with him injured?" He didn't finish the sentence, but Layla understood. Cole's wounds were slowing him down, no matter how much he tried to hide it. Cole's voice was like steel. "I'll make it." Daniel studied him for a moment, then gave a curt nod. "We move at first light. Until then, rest while you can." Cole insisted on taking the first watch despite Daniel's protests. Layla tried to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw flashes of the night's chaos, gunfire tearing through the trees, Cole staggering as blood bloomed across his shoulder, the relentless pursuit that had driven them into this underground maze. When she finally drifted into an uneasy doze, it felt like only seconds later that Cole's hand was shaking her awake. "Time to go," he whispered. The air outside the cave was bitterly cold, the pre-dawn light casting the forest in shades of gray. They moved quickly, keeping low, every step deliberate and silent. Daniel led, navigating by instinct and landmarks Layla couldn't begin to recognize. Cole followed, leaning on her when he faltered but never complaining. Layla's legs ached, her lungs burned, but she pushed herself harder, fueled by sheer determination. They had to make it. They had to. Hours passed in a blur of exertion and fear. Once, they heard voices behind them and dropped to the ground, lying motionless as a pair of black Viper mercenaries passed within yards of their hiding place. Layla's heart slammed so hard she was sure it would give them away, but somehow the men moved on without noticing. When it was safe again, Cole helped her to her feet, his touch grounding her. "Almost there," he murmured, though she could hear the strain in his voice. Finally, as the sun climbed higher, they crested a ridge and saw the ranger station below. It was a squat, sturdy building surrounded by towering pines, its weathered exterior blending into the forest. Relief surged through Layla so powerfully her knees nearly buckled. "We made it," she breathed. Daniel's face remained grim. "Not yet. If they tracked us here," his warning proved prophetic. Even as they descended toward the station, the distant roar of engines reached their ears. Black Viper had found them. "Go!" Cole barked, adrenaline snapping him back into command mode. They ran the last stretch, bursting into the ranger station just as the first SUVs appeared on the horizon. Inside, Daniel immediately began setting up the satellite uplink, his hands moving with practiced speed. "Buy me 10 minutes, he shouted. Cole grabbed a rifle from the wall, checking the magazine with efficient precision. Layla clutched her pistol, her palms slick with sweat. "Where do you want me?" she asked, her voice trembling but resolute. Cole gave her a fierce, proud look. "Stay with me. Watch my back." The first wave hit hard. Windows shattered as Black Viper opened fire, bullets thudding into the walls. Cole returned fire with deadly accuracy, taking down 2 men before they even reached cover. Layla crouched beside him, firing in short, controlled bursts like he'd taught her. Her hands shook, but she held her ground. Outside, Daniel's generator roared to life, powering the satellite dish. "Almost there," he yelled over the chaos. Cole gritted his teeth, shifting to shield Layla as a hail of bullets tore through the doorway. Pain lanced through his side, but he didn't falter. "Stay low," he barked. Layla obeyed, ducking as shards of wood sprayed around them. She risked a glance at Daniel. "How much longer?" 30 seconds. Daniel shouted back. The mercenaries surged forward, their leader, a towering figure in black body armor, bellowing orders. Cole recognized him instantly. His face hardened with rage. "That's the one who set the trap," he growled. Without hesitation, he charged forward, moving with lethal precision despite his injuries. Layla's scream of warning was lost in the din. Cole and the mercenary leader collided in a brutal clash of fists and fury. The fight was savage, primal. Cole's strength was fueled by sheer will, every strike a vow of vengeance for his fallen team. The leader fought with ruthless skill, but Cole refused to give ground. Outside, more vehicles were arriving. Layla turned, firing desperately to keep them at bay. Daniel shouted triumphantly, "Transmission sent. The proof is out there." Layla's heart leapt even as fear clawed at her. They'd succeeded, but Black Viper wouldn't simply give up now. The mercenary leader snarled and lunged, knocking Cole to the ground. Layla didn't think, she raised her pistol and fired. The man jerked, then crumpled, dead before he hit the floor. Silence fell for a single, stunned heartbeat. Then Cole staggered to his feet, his eyes meeting Layla's. Gratitude, pride, and something deeper passed between them. "You saved my life," he said hoarsely. Layla's hands shook as she lowered the pistol. "We saved each other." Daniel grabbed a backpack, stuffing the data drive inside. "We have to move. Reinforcements are coming." Cole nodded, slipping an arm around Layla as they fled the burning station. Behind them, Black Viper's empire was crumbling, their crimes exposed to the world. As they disappeared into the forest, Layla glanced back one last time. The sun was rising, casting golden light over the battlefield they were leaving behind. They weren't safe yet, but for the first time, hope burned bright in her chest. Cole squeezed her hand, his voice low and steady. "It's over, Layla. We won." She looked up at him, tears mingling with a fierce smile. "No," she whispered. "This is just the beginning." And together they walked toward whatever future awaited them, unbroken and unafraid. The end.